Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the fourth workshop of Entrepreneurship Week. At EIC, we believe that knowledge of the different domains hold an important place in entrepreneur's toolbox. Knowing how to apply domain knowledge to your venture may determine the success of your business. So we bring to you mega collaboration with all the domain clubs at IIM Rohtak to all budding entrepreneurs with the key to a perfect start. For today's workshop, we have IIM Rohtak's Finance and Investment Club with us. I'll invite Surbi to take the stage forward.
Thank you, Dipanshu. For any business to function like a well-oiled machine, it's the underlying cash flows and the capital base which moves the company forward by fueling its growth and expansion. Raising capital is of prime importance for every startup business, as scarcity of funds may pose liquidity and working capital challenges, which may endanger the survival of the company. But raising funds can prove to be a lengthy and a tiresome task, as one of the critical reasons for most startups' failure is not having a well thought out and a clear financial plan or model in place. Hence, a good understanding of financing and fundraising is imperative to know to help grow a startup to the next level. Welcoming you all to the fourth workshop of Entrepreneurship Week, we have with us today Dr. Dhruv Nath, angel investor and director at Lead Angels Network, to speak about creating and funding a startup. Earlier, Sir was a senior vice president with NIIT Limited. He has been a consultant to the top management of several organizations such as Glaxo, Gillette, Nestle, Indian Oil Corporation, Thermax, Bajaj Auto, etc., as well as to the Prime Minister of Namibia and Chief Minister of Delhi.
So just hold on. I
Yes,
must
sir.
clarify. I was a consultant, sorry, to the Prime Minister of Namibia, after which he lost the election, and I was a consultant to the Chief Minister of Delhi, after which he died. Right. So please, my advice is very powerful. You have to be very careful.
Sure, sir. So if I can continue, Dr. Nath has a BTech in electrical engineering and a PhD in computer science, both from IIT Delhi. He has written 4 books, the latest being Funding Your Startup and Other Nightmares, co-authored with Shushanto Butra and published by Penguin Random House. We welcome you, sir. We would love to know about your experiences. If you can share your thoughts on the topic with us.
Okay, great. Thank you, Surbi. Thank you, Dipanshu, and great to have all of you guys here. So I must tell you that um, I I find it tremendously exciting to spend time with young people like you. And before COVID, I used to call you guys over to, CCD or Costa Coffee or whatever. And we used to sit across the table. Unfortunately, that can't happen now. But even online, I find I learn a hell of a lot from you guys. And that keeps me young, even though I'm very close to retirement. I retire in about 5 days from now. So, what I will do is, by the way, I don't have a finance background. That's not my background. But I have I've been an angel investor for many years, and therefore I have spent a lot of time mentoring startups as well as raising funds for them. So what I will share with you essentially is my personal experience. I will not go into theories of finance because I don't know them. You probably know a hell of a lot more than I do. Okay. So maybe what I'll do is I will just start by sharing my screen. Hold on. This is Google, isn't it? Yeah. So I will present. Okay, can you see this? Can you see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay, great. So I will talk about funding of startup, and I must tell you that I've actually written a book. I don't know if you can see it here. That's my book. This is my fourth book. So this is on helping startups become successful and raising funding, right? What I will do here is I will take you through, first of all, one story from this book and take you through its journey. And there is a framework that we've created for successful startups, and I'll take you through that framework. Then in part two, I will actually talk about the funding process, the angel investors, the venture capitalists, the strategic investors, etc., etc. So I'll do it in that part. And anytime you want me to interrupt, you want to interrupt me, most welcome. So let's look at one of the stories. The story I'll talk about is a story called Squirrel, right? It's a company, and After this session, you can actually go to their website, and if you want, you can download the app, because you guys, or well, not even you guys, typically youngsters are the target audience for this company. So, if you watch squirrels in action, and if you sit in a park and watch them, you'll find that they pick up food, all right? So they pick up nuts, they pick up berries, and so on. And some of that they eat, but some of that they actually save, because they know that there will be times in their life when they are not able to get food. For example, in the monsoons, right? So they need to save. Now, if you look at human beings, humans also need to save, although it's money, not food. The problem with saving, it's a very fundamental problem, is there are too many temptations, isn't it? How many of you save? It's almost none. So you have a great new, bike coming out from Royal Enfield. I mean, you have no choice. You have to buy it. You have no choice. Or there's a great new restaurant in town. Of course, I'm not talking of COVID times. Great new restaurant in town, and multiple boyfriends and girlfriends have to land up there and spend maybe 400-500 per head, or maybe more, right? So there are so many temptations that saving becomes very, very difficult. And to understand how people save, I'll just take you back to your grandmother's time. Okay. And some of you may have seen this. So if you remember your grandmother's time, there used to be this kind of little pot, okay, with a slot in it. It's called a gullak. And what she used to do was, so let us say she bought sabzi for 9 rupees 80 paise, and she gave the sabzi wala 10 rupees, and she got 20 paise change in return. That 20 paise would go into the slot in the gullak, and you couldn't open the gullak, right? So the money that went in was saved, and ultimately it grew and grew till it became a reasonably large corpus, at the end of which, she could break it and buy a sari or whatever she wanted to buy. Now, the basic reason why this worked, and I think that's important to understand, is that this is painless. Why is it painless? Because, if you spend 9 rupees 80 paise, spending an extra 20 paise is not really a problem, right? Whether you spend 980 or 10, it doesn't really matter, isn't it? So that's why it has worked. What Squirrel did was they effectively automated this gullak. Okay, how? So they created an app, and they said, okay, in this app, we will take permission from you, and we will take access to your SMSs. Now, every time you spend money, whether it is through a credit card or UPI or Paytm or online banking or whatever, it doesn't matter what, some wallet. Every time you spend money, you will get an SMS which tells you how much you spent. Given the fact that you've given access to the Squirrel app to see your SMSs, it accesses your SMSs, of course, only those which talk about spending. So if, for example, Dipanshu is getting an SMS from his girlfriend. Dipanshu, you have a girlfriend, no? Chup hai. Kyun chup hai? Dipanshu, you have a girlfriend?
No, sir.
No? I don't know if you noticed, he said that in a very, very, very sad voice. Anyway, ho jayega, don't worry.
No, sir, don't believe him, sir.
Oh, I see. Okay. Are you the girlfriend? Okay. Anyway, so the app accesses all your SMSs. Of course, it ignores the, the personal SMSs. I think somebody is very excited about girlfriends. So if you can just put yourself on mute. We can talk about girlfriends if you want. I'll just switch off all this. But it may be better to talk about startups right now. No? Okay. So the app knows what you spent, and at the end of the week, it totals up all your expenses. So let us say your expenses come to 1,670. It will then round this up to the nearest 100. So that means 30 rupees will take it to 1,700, and that 30 rupees is saved, right? It is saved by the app, and it is saved online. And obviously, to give the saver, the customer some returns, this amount is put into a liquid fund. I mean, I'm sure you guys being from finance would understand what liquid funds are. Essentially, you're getting some little return virtually every day, even though it's a very tiny amount, right? It's a motivator. Now, one big advantage over the Gullak. Can anybody tell me what's the advantage over the Gullak? The physical Gullak?
Amount
The physical Gullak, the temptation to break is means reduced. If we have digitally, we use some part of it, but when we have Gullak, we don't want to break it.
Well,
So there's also a positive reinforcement at the end. I read in the book Atomic Habits by James Clear that if I have a purpose, let's say I'm going to spend 2000 rupees on a shoes. If I only resist the temptation, I won't be happy. But if I, let's say, transfer that 2000 for a home I'm going to purchase, that will make me happier. So good luck can give you a positive
yeah,
reinforcement.
but that's also true of the Gullak, isn't it? I'm talking of this guy, the squirrel over the original Gullak. See, this is automatic. In the Gullak, the lady had to remember to put in the change. Here you don't. Here it's automatic, right? So it's automatically saved. You don't have to remember anything, right? So it's automated. Okay. Target segment. This guy very clearly was aiming at youngsters, right? Young adults, which typically means either college students or people in their first or second jobs. In fact, he doesn't target anybody beyond about 30 or 35, right? So that's his target segment. How does he make money? Very clearly, saving. You cannot ask people to pay for having their money saved. That he was very clear. But once they are on board, you can offer them other financial products such as loans, such as insurance, such as investment in mutual funds, and therefore charge for these. So that is how Squirrel makes its money. Okay, so I will stop the Squirrel story here. What I want to spend a few minutes on is in the book, and that's the book I'm referring to. In fact, you can see it in the corner, the bottom right corner of my screen. In this book, we have talked about something called a persistent framework, where the word persistent is an acronym. So each letter in the word persistent stands for something. So let's try and analyze Squirrel from within this framework. First of all, if you look at the P in the word persistent, you have to be solving a problem for somebody. Because if you're not solving a problem, nobody is going to pay you, right? And clearly Squirrel was solving a problem because they were solving the problem of saving. People were not disciplined, they were not saving, they were helping guys to save. So first step was okay. Second step, you need to have an earnings model, which means people have to be willing to pay you for it. Okay, otherwise you don't get any revenues. Now here, people would not pay you for saving, for helping them save, but they would definitely pay you for helping them buy mutual funds, helping them take loans, helping them buy insurance and so on. Okay, so there was an earnings model. Third, very important, size of the market, because obviously if you're creating a startup, you want to grow and you want to grow a hell of a lot. Now you can't grow unless the market in your market size, the size of the market in which you're operating is large. Only then can you grow, correct? So here the size of the market is huge because, they were aiming at basically whom? They were aiming at the middle class, and in the middle class, they were aiming at youngsters. That's about 10 crores or 15 crores, right? It's a huge market and it's potentially a lifelong market, right? Guys who join, if they're happy here, could actually stick on, right? So it's a very, very large market, no problem. Next question is scalability, right? And notice I'm taking each letter of the word persistent one by one. So scalability is what? Size of the market is how big is the market. Scalability is how rapidly can you grow within this market. Okay, so your size of the market may be large, but you may be a non-scalable business. Now, you must remember one thing, any business which is largely digital is highly scalable because to grow revenues, all you need to do at most is maybe to add additional server capacity, right, for your website. Okay. But if you have a business which is largely manual, or has a lot of manual component, then you have to keep adding manpower, which means you have to keep adding buildings, you have to keep adding infrastructure to grow, and that does not make it a scalable business. You can't do that rapidly. Okay. So Squirrel is a very highly scalable business because it is entirely digital. Next question, and very, very important, is risks. See, you must remember every business has risks. It is stupid to think that, you know, your business does not. Every business has risks. And the biggest risk is the risk of competition. Okay. And I would imagine you have heard the word moat somewhere, or entry barrier, right? Very simply, what is entry barrier? This is my business. I want to prevent my competitor or my potential competitor from entering into my business and eating away into my market share. Okay, so that's what we call an entry barrier. And incidentally, if you have an innovative solution, for example, if you have something which is patented, then you have a very strong entry barrier because your competitor cannot copy you. Just remember one thing, entry barriers are not permanent. You have to make sure that you constantly enhance your entry barrier, because your competitor, if it's a good business, your competitor is always trying to copy you. Agreed? So now look at Squirrel. What kind of entry barrier did these guys have? Actually, initially it was very, very low, because anybody can get into this business, right? Anybody can help you save, right? Anybody who develops an app, although developing the app would have given these guys maybe a 3-month advantage, because the competitor would have taken those 3 months to develop the app. Over time, trust and brand become some kind of entry barriers, but it's not very significant. So which is why the need for Squirrel to scale up rapidly. And as of today, they have about 4 lakh users, of which I think about half are active users, which is actually a fairly large number. Right? So please remember, entry barrier often builds up over time. You know, you look at Paytm. Paytm now has a solid entry barrier because everybody has it, right? And everybody talks about it. Okay. So entry barrier is something which builds up over time. But like I said, this is one area where Squirrel was not great. Okay, so now let's get into the next thing. What do you do if the market is crowded? You know, in the whole space of offering financial products like Squirrel was doing, which is loans and mutual funds and insurance and so on, it's a hugely crowded market, right? You got big guys. You've got Paisa Bazaar, you've got Policy Bazaar, you've got Bank Bazaar, you got ET Money, you got Paytm Money, you got Zerodha. Everybody is trying to fight for the same market. So in a highly crowded market with a lot of big guys, it's very difficult to compete. Okay. And if that is the case, it's a good idea to identify a subset of that market which is not crowded, right? And I will call that a niche, a subset which is not crowded. And if you look at Squirrel, clearly they had identified a niche, because, you know, they said, if you look at guys, middle-aged guys, look, you know, people in the age group of 40, 50, 60, they are already used to the idea of saving, investing in SIPs, buying insurance, buying mutual fund. They're already into that. So it's very, very difficult for Squirrel to crack that market. But first timers have not yet got into this habit. All right. College students have not yet got into it. Guys in their first job or girls in their first job have not yet got into it. So what Squirrel said was, okay, we will only target first timers, which is typically people in the age group of 18 to 30. So that's the niche they had. It's not a crowded market because not too many people are tackling them. But once they are in, and once those guys are comfortable, as they grow older, hopefully many of them will stick with picking up financial products from Squirrel. All right, so that was their idea. Okay, so 2 more things. Number 1, obviously you may have the best earnings model, you have a highly innovative solution, very scalable, but the final proof is in Hindi, dhanda aa raha hai ki nahi? Are you actually getting people? Are they actually paying? Are you growing month on month, quarter on quarter? So that is what we call traction. And of course, the most important thing is what I call the team, which is how strong is the team, starting with the founder. because we believe very strongly, and everybody believes, a good founder will make sure that you are able to go through the ups and downs of creating a startup and survive and grow. Okay. I just want to mention one thing. Persistent is a framework, and I just showed you. So if you take the first letter of each of these, that stands for, that gives you the word persistent, which is an acronym. But the word persistent also has an English meaning, which means what? You have to go on and on and on at it. You have to persevere. Don't give up. Don't give up. Because, you have lots of ups and downs in startups. You'll probably have more downs than ups. And the only way to survive and grow is to just keep on and on. You can't give up. Okay. So which is why, in addition to the acronym persistent, you need to be physically persistent as well. So that brings me to the end of the first part, which is part 1. And what I'll do is I will quickly switch over to the second part. Just hold on. And then maybe we can have questions, right? Or if you want to interrupt me midway, you're most welcome. Just hold on. Yes, can you see my screen now? Can you see this part 2?
No,
Hello?
sir.
No?
No, sir.
not
No,
yet.
sir. No, sir.
Hold on. So why is it not working? Hold on.
So your screen is not shared.
Now can you see it?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Now? Funding your startup part 2?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Yes.
Great. So now I'll come to the actual funding part, right? And you'll see why I talked about the persistent framework when I go through this. How much time do we have? 6:08. Okay. So first of all, when I talk about funding, I will not talk about debt funding because that's not very common for startups. And I will not talk about grants either because grants are available from the government for certain industries. For example, healthcare, the government is willing to give grants, right? I'll basically talk about equity funding, or essentially getting somebody to buy shares in your company. So, the first place where you normally get money is friends and family, okay, which includes your own sources, whatever savings you have, right? That's normally the first place. And the most important thing is these people are known to you, right? So it could be your chacha, your mama, your father, your mother, your grandfather, whatever, right? Or your friends, girlfriend, boyfriend, girlfriend's father. So these are people who know you and therefore they will not ask too many questions. They don't need, your friends and family will not ask you for your balance sheet. They will not ask you for your P&L, profit and loss account. They will not ask you for your detailed Excel projections of your business. They will not ask you for all this, right? And they are willing to give you money at a very early stage because they know you. Ah, bhai, theek hai, paisa le le mere se, right? Incidentally, it is very, very, very important to maintain good relations with your chacha mama because you never know when you need to go to them for money. Okay, so they will give you money at a very early stage, but typically it will be small amounts. And our experience has been that the total amount people can raise through friends and family would be anywhere between about 5 and 30-40 lakhs. Okay, unless you happen to be from Mukesh Ambani's family, so then just replace the word lakh with tens of crores. Right? But I'm assuming none of you is part of that family, and therefore you'll probably get only small amounts. So that's step 1. Step 2 is what we call angel investors. Now, I don't know how many of you are aware, since you're in finance, I would assume all of you are aware of what angel investors are. Is that right or wrong? No? No. Okay. So let me explain. these are the first external investors in your company, in your startup, right? Friends and family are not external. They are known to you. These are guys who don't know you. Okay. Why are they called angel investors? Anyone?
So because they invest at the seed stage.
Correct. Who said that?
So
What's your
Shreyans.
name? Sorry?
Shreyans.
Shreyans. Okay. Shreyans, I'm just sending you one chocolate. I have a carton of chocolates which I'll share with all of you guys. Okay, good. So, you know, angels help you when nobody else is willing to help you, right? So these are angel investors. They are willing to help you at a very, very early stage. But because they are helping you at an early stage they are helping you after the friends and family, they will still need far more details about your startup to be convinced. So they will need to know, they will definitely see your balance sheet. They will definitely see your profit and loss account. They will definitely talk to your customers. They will definitely want to see a demo of your product. Or if you have a finished product, they want to see the actual product, right? So they will want all these. And typically they will look for some proof, some traction that it is actually working. It is not just an idea in the sky. Incidentally, with COVID, this has got a little worse, because now people are asking for even more proof, since money has got a little more scarce, and the opportunities that the investors have to invest have suddenly boomed. So the same investors have many more opportunities, and they say, okay, now we want to see much more revenues from you, much more growth. But they will put in far more money than family and friends. And typically, angel investors will put in anywhere between about 30-40 lakhs and about 3.5 crores, that range. Now, I must clarify one thing. You know, in our industry, which is the startup industry, you may be doing a business which is entirely in rupees. You may be operating in the rural environment. You may be raising money purely in rupees. But it is fashionable to talk about it in dollars. You know, I mean, you go to a party and you want to say, look, I raised 3 crores. Koi teri baat sunega nahi. But when you say I raised $500,000, now suddenly you're somebody, right? So which is why a lot of people talk about $1 million. And like I said, angels typically will give you up to about $500,000. Okay, now fundamental question. What do angel investors look for? Can somebody share? What do they look for before they invest?
A working idea.
Some
maybe.
minimum viable product and the idea.
And can you give me your names also, please? Because I have to send chocolates, remember.
So my name is Isha Jaiswal. And
Sorry, Nishu.
Isha Jaiswal.
Isha. Okay. Yeah,
Yes,
Isha.
sir.
Chocolate for you. Tell me.
So thank you so much, sir. And so I think angels look for the minimum viable product, how much traction, initial traction that you have brought for the product, and how much recurring the customer is for the product.
Badhiya. Wonderful. So you get 2 chocolates.
Thank you.
But don't eat them simultaneously, because young ladies should not be eating too much chocolate. All right.
So
Anybody
is it
else?
virtual?
Sir,
So the chocolate is virtual?
I'll send you physical chocolates the moment COVID is over.
Thank you so much, sir.
I'll actually come to your campus. Okay. Anybody else?
Sir, I would like to add up.
Yeah. What's your name?
Manan Jain. Manan.
तो ये तू अभी से
Yes, sir.
चॉकलेट ले ले पहले. हाँ बता.
Sir, I guess apart from what we said, it's more about the future long-term profits. I guess they don't care what's your exact businesses, but what they care about is how much return they would be getting, and will it be more than the return they would be getting in other investments.
Okay, agreed. But for that, they have to look at your business, which is what Isha was saying. Correct? Yeah. Somebody else? Yeah. Just give me your name again.
Yash, yes, sir.
Shreyas.
Yash.
Okay.
Yeah. Good evening, sir. So I think they look for the competency in the team, and they would have the team that could build up this idea and take this to the next level. But where they are putting this money or not. Anyone can build the idea, but not the team.
Wonderful. So all of you get chocolates, and if I were to just combine, yeah, who's that?
Sir, Shreyans.
Shreyans.
So probably the unit economics, the customer lifetime value, and the customer acquisition cost. If it's a market that where winner takes all, if it has some kind of network effects, if the company has some unfair advantage in terms of founder, or is the market growing more than 20%, 25% year in year basis, and the problem is solvable, and it is well paid to solve that problem. That might also be a
Yeah,
couple of factors.
Shreyans, what you can do is you can join me in taking the lecture.
Sir, I saw Y
तेरे को
Combinator
सब-
video.
तेरे को तो सब हाँ तेरे को सब कुछ आता है यार तेरे को anyway I'll send you a full carton of chocolates. ठीक है बढ़िया what wonderful. So by the way, if you were to just combine whatever all of you have said, this is what angels look for, right? How much traction do you have? What is the team like? Is it a large market? Do you have an innovative solution? Do you have something which sets you apart? Do you have an entry barrier which keeps out competition? Do you have an earnings model? Do you have a consistent earnings model? Sticky customers, right? So absolutely. So, what you must remember is that unfortunately, very often there is this perception that founders and investors are actually at loggerheads. No, they want exactly the same thing. Both of them want a good, successful, solid, growing company that keeps out competition. And therefore, both of them look for exactly the same thing, which is our persistent framework. Okay, so now I'll just talk about angel networks, right? Briefly. Can anybody tell me what an angel network is? Any one person?
Yes, sir. So my
Yeah.
name is Isha Jaiswal again.
Yeah,
Yes,
Isha,
sir.
right.
Angel Network is a network of seed investors, early stage startup investors. Like we have VCATs, Venture Catalyst, then we have Indian Angel Networks, and many such networks like these.
Okay, great, wonderful. Two more chocolates for you. I'm actually running out of chocolates now, but anyway, I keep promising. That's okay. So, let me tell you how angel networks came into being. And I will try and talk about what the process is when you, when you invest. So earlier, about 15 years back, you only had a few rich angels, right? You had guys like Ratan Tata, you had guys like Premji, Azim Premji, Narayan Murthy, Nilekani, Anand Mahindra, guys like this. And these guys, there were two things about them. One is because they were so rich, the amount that a person was trying to raise, a startup was trying to raise, which normally at this level is of the order of 1 crore, right? Could be little less, could be 2 crores. Sorry, 1/3 of $1 million, right? I made a mistake. So, that kind of money, one or two rich angels are able to put in. There is no problem, right? That is number one. Number two, these guys have their own analysts, their lawyers, their accountants, they have their own team. Okay, and therefore they are able to review startups for possible investment. So you didn't actually need angel networks at that time. Now there is something which I call an Aam Aadmi angel. And please remember, this has nothing to do with the Aam Aadmi party of Kejriwal. It is basically common man investors, right? So I am an Aam Aadmi angel. I'm salaried. I worked for 20 years in the IT industry. I earned a salary. I'm working as a professor right now at MDI. I earn a salary, right? I cannot invest the kinds of money that Azim Premji can, right? But I can invest 5 lakhs at a time, maybe 10 lakhs at a time in a few startups. So now the problem is, firstly, you have, if a guy wants to reach, if a guy wants to raise, let's say 1 crore, and each angel is putting in something like 5 to 10 lakhs, you need about 15 to 20 angels to raise that entire amount, right? But to get those 15 to 20 angels, you probably have to approach 1,000, because not all of them will invest, only some of them will invest. How the hell do you approach all those angels, right? So startups have a problem, founders have a problem. How do we approach so many potential investors? Earlier it was easier. Secondly, because these guys are not super rich, they don't have their own teams, their own accountants, analysts, lawyers, and therefore they need support. And that support comes from the angel network. And one such angel network, one of the leading angel networks is Lead Angels Network, which I am a part of, right? And I think Isha mentioned correctly, Indian Angel Network is probably the oldest and maybe the largest as of today. Okay, but they are now gradually moving out of angel investing. They have actually created a fund, and their focus is more on the fund. So anyway, this is the background of an angel network. Now, I want to spend a little time with you guys on how you apply for angel funding, right? And please remember, I have mentioned angel dollars here in the picture, but it could be rupees. In fact, in most cases, it is rupees. So as a founder, you will approach an angel network, or normally you will approach about 2 or 3 of them, right? And there are, I would say, about 6 or 7 leading angel networks in the country. Then there are some smaller local ones. For example, there is Chandigarh Angels, Jaipur Angels, you have Kolkata Angel. But the big ones are people like Lead Angel, Indian Angel Network, Mumbai Angels, Hyderabad Angels. They are the big ones, right? So you apply to an angel network, not to individual angel, because that's impossible. Then the angel network gets together and shortlists. So typically at Lead Angels, we get about 150 applicants in a month, roughly. And we shortlist out of these about 3 per month, right? Because, the entire world is looking for funding. Everybody wants money, okay? So we shortlist those who we believe are fundable. Then we ask them to make a pitch, which is basically what? Presenting their case to investors, and there we call in our members, and our members are angel investors. So we would have at Lead Angels about 200 angel investors, and that is true of most of the other angel networks as well, right? So we ask them to make a pitch, at the end of which the investors then figure out which ones are of interest and which ones are not. So those which are of interest are then studied in much more detail, because remember, this is a risky business and you got to study the startup in detail, right? Having done this, then the investors who have actually studied these, they come and talk to the other investors and say, boss, it is worth investing in. I am committing 10 lakhs or 5 lakhs. Now we will take commitments from all of you guys. So whoever is interested will make a commitment. There is no compulsion. Only those who want make a commitment, and typically the minimum amount is about 5 lakhs. And at that stage, we also sign what is called a term sheet, which is basically a kind of MOU between the investors and the angels. After that, it's still not over. After that, there is what we call due diligence, which means financial due diligence, statutory due diligence. Have you been filing all the reports that the government of India wants you to? And legal due diligence. Are your agreements in place, right? So all this is done typically by accountants and lawyers. Once that is clear, then we sign what is called a shareholder agreement and the money comes in. Okay, and this process typically takes something like 3 to 4 months, not less, because you can see the number of steps that are involved, but it can take longer in case, for example, I remember there was one company which came to us, which was not a private limited company. And normally investors do not invest in companies which are pure partnerships. So we said, look, you do your conversion, and that took much more time. That took an extra 2 months. Right? But normally it's 3 to 4 months. Okay, so I've talked about angel investors, and now we will come to VCs or venture capitalists. And the question which I have for you guys, and let some new people answer, what is the fundamental difference between a VC and an angel? Fundamental difference. There are many differences, but I'm looking for the root cause. What's the fundamental difference, the basic difference? Anyone? No one? Okay, so then we get the same young people again, Isha and Shreyans and gang. Yeah, tell me, what's the difference?
So this is Shweta Singh. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
I'm giving it a try. So I think venture capitalists are people who basically deal in money, who are there for funds only. But angel investors can be anyone. They can be highly successful business or other people as well.
Okay, you're right. So you get a chocolate, but that's not the basic difference. What is the basic difference, fundamental difference?
So,
Yeah, who said that?
Isha.
Isha.
So,
Yeah,
yes. Sir, so venture capitalists are those who actually use the pooled money of the investors, which is basically collected funds of all the investors, and then they decide where to invest or not. But angels are those who step in the very basic steps of the
Okay,
business.
wonderful, wonderful. So you get a full carton of chocolates. At least thank me.
Thank you, sir.
Perfect. So, you know, the fundamental difference is, so this is the next stage after angel investor, right? Fundamental difference is just compare it with the stock market, right? You have two ways to invest in the stock market. One is you buy shares of HDFC Bank or Reliance or Info Edge or Hindustan Lever or whatever you want, right? You are investing your own money. Two is you give your money to a mutual fund manager and you tell him, boss, you decide because I don't have the time or the expertise. So he invests, he raises a pool of money, which could be 500 crores, 1000 crores, and he invests that money. So the fundamental difference between the mutual fund manager and the direct investor is the investor who's buying shares directly is putting in his own money, but the mutual fund manager is putting in somebody else's money, right? Somebody else who's put money into his fund. And that's exactly the difference between the angel and the VC. So the angel puts in his own money. That's what I do. But the VC pulls in money from investors who don't have the expertise, but they say we want to invest in startups. And therefore the VC pulls this amount and says, okay, now I'll decide whether to put it into Byju's or to put it in Grofers or put it in Oyo Rooms or whatever, right? So that's the VC. And given the fact that this is the fundamental difference, how will the behavior of VC fund managers be different from the behavior of angels? Tell me, what's the fundamental difference in behavior? And this time you'll get a bigger slab of chocolate, whoever answers. No?
Sir, can you repeat the question?
I'm saying, because VCs put in somebody else's money and angels put in their own money, what is the difference in behavior between these two guys?
Hello, sir. I think the basic difference would be the risk-taking capacity.
बहुत बढ़िया. Who's that?
Sir, Lavish this side.
Lavish, yeah, थोड़ा ऊंचा बोल यार. I mean,
Hello.
डर के मत
Yes,
बोल
sir,
यार, ऊंचा
Lavish.
बोलो. Lavish.
Yes, sir.
बढ़िया. You get 2 chocolates.
Thank
Wonderful.
you,
So VCs have to take less risk, you know, because VCs, somebody has trusted them with their money. They can't go back to the invest. Sorry, boss, सारा चला गया, मर गया हमारा startup. They can't say that, right? Although it does happen. So, which means if they have to take less risk, that means they have to wait more time for the startup to stabilize, to prove its business and to grow. Correct? Which is why VCs come in at a later stage. Angels come in early because, you know, you have a brilliant idea. Angels say, "Ha, boss, great idea. मैं तो डाल रहा हूँ पैसा." I have done that many times and I've lost money. Not an issue. But the VC cannot afford that. So the VC waits for some time, typically a year, 2 years. Some have much more traction than the angel, and then he puts in money. And therefore, he needs much more revenues, much more proof, much more traction. He will look at, he'll do a much more detailed evaluation, right? So he will typically look at the balance sheet in detail, projections in detail, past performance in detail, all these things he will look at. And ultimately, when he decides to put in money, he will put in much more money than the angel. Agreed? So this is typically your VC. What do VCs look for? We saw what angels were looking for. What do VCs look for? Anyone?
Good exit strategy.
Yeah. So by the way, every investor looks for an exit strategy because every investor ultimately wants to put in money and hopefully get an exit, which means sell his shares to somebody else at a higher valuation. So that is true of both angels and VCs. But what do they look for?
Scalability.
I think quicker returns on the money.
But incidentally, VCs and angels don't look for quick returns because they know, see, in the stock market, I mean, you may get reasonable returns fast, but in this market, your exits are normally at least 4 to 5 years away, at least, if at all you get an exit, right? So ultimately, a VC is an investor just like an angel, isn't it? So the VC looks for exactly what the angel look for, but more. So they will look for a bigger size of market. They will look for very high scalability. They will look for very high traction. They will look for a team of founders which can grow the business solidly to, 50 crores, 100 crores, whatever. But ultimately, it is the same persistent thing that they look at. So all investors, irrespective of whether it is angels or VCs, will look at what I call the persistent model. So far, are we okay? So now let me take the next category of investor, the strategic investor. And finally, I've shared with you the favorite term of all B schools, strategic, right? So what is a strategic investor and how is he different from the angel and the VC?
So could it be an investor that can help the business in some form or fashion?
So by the way, even angels very often tend to mentor startups, and even the VC normally will take a board seat and they will actually spend a fair amount of time with the company. So even they do that. There is one fundamental difference again between the strategic investor and the VC or angel. What is that?
Sir, with the help means with strategic investors, the business gets some benefit. Like the strategic investor could be the someone our competitor or someone who can help us in grow
बहुत
business.
बढ़िया. Who spoke?
Vikas, sir.
विकास, यार तेरे को कितने चॉकलेट दूं? 5.
Thank you,
ठीक
sir.
है, वो डंजो से भेज दो, डंजो से. ठीक है,
Sir,
perfect.
I want to add one more point here.
Yeah.
Sir,
Who's that?
maybe it would, sir,
Who's
Lavish
that?
this side.
Lavish,
Lavish this side. Sir, maybe they are looking for a potential merger or acquisition
बहुत
or
बढ़िया, wonderful,
something on
wonderful,
that.
wonderful. Oh, you're a finance guy there, you would know this. So, the angel investor and the VC, they are financial investors. Their interest is what? मैं पैसा डालूंगा, 4 साल बाद, 5 साल बाद मुझे exit चाहिए है at 5 times, 10 times, 8 times, 6 times the valuation at which I put in money, right? They are pure financial investors. So once they exit, they have no interest in the company. Ab to nikal gaye, isn't it? But a strategic investor is not that kind, like Vikas and Lavish rightly said. So if you look at, for example, ICICI Bank investing in a microfinance startup, right? I assume you guys know what a microfinance company is. So they will give loans to rural women in groups. And, if they are investing in a microfinance startup, they are not investing to take an exit in 4 years. Why are they investing? They are investing because so far they've been giving loans to, people who are buying cars or homes or personal loan or business, but they are not in this space and they feel it's a big area to grow in. So rather than growing it themselves, they say, "Theek hai, we will buy a 30, 40, 50% stake, equity stake in some microfinance startup, and then they become a kind of subsidiary to ICICI Bank. So we will solidly be involved in the government. Whether they merge with us or not is a different issue, but essentially it's an extension to our business. And that is the reason why we make a strategic investment, right? So a strategic investor has no interest in exiting. He is basically enhancing his own existing business, correct? Okay, so just to summarize, you have friends and family, angel investors, VC, strategic. So the amount of investment normally goes up, the level of risk goes down, and the valuation also goes up, correct? And these are just some terms which I'll throw. One kind of term which is thrown around all the time is Series A, Series B, pre-Series A, 50 lakh. Well, nobody says 50 lakh, they say angel funding, seed funding, right? But these are just terms. So typically pre-Series A is 500,000 to 1 million, even if it is raised in rupees. Series A is 1 to 3, Series B is 3 to 5. But these are just terms, like I said. I mean, if you want to raise a series, you want to call it Series C, but actually you're raising only 3 million, that's okay. Nobody will put you into jail. CBI will not follow you. These are just terms that are thrown, right? So that's the range of investments. Now, I just want to do a quick check. It is now 6:36. When do I have to stop? because I'll take about 5 to 8 minutes more, or 5 to maybe 10 minutes. Is that okay?
Yes, sir. Like we could do up to 45, 50.
Yeah, that I have 9 minutes then. Okay, done. So do you want me to cover valuation? Otherwise, I'll skip it, and we can have questions.
So please cover this part.
Okay, fine.
Yes, sir. Please cover this part.
Okay, so now, all of you are familiar with methods of valuation, and I think the most common one which all of you would have read is DCF, right? Discounted cash flows. I'm assuming you're all familiar with this. Is that correct? How you
Yes.
value a company? Yeah?
Yes, sir. Most of us.
Yeah. Okay. So basically you're doing what? You're looking at future profits which come in the form of cash, and you apply a formula based on this. Very simple. Now the point is, when you're trying to project future cash flows, future profits, right? How do you project? So if you look at HDFC Bank, for example, it's a very steady bank. It has been in existence for what, 25 years? And typically it has cash inflows, or let's say profits of net profit of about 18 to 20% growth every year. So it is reasonable to project that into the future and say, okay, for the next 3 to 5 years, these guys will continue to grow at maybe not 20%, but maybe 15 to 20%, right? 15 to 18%. So you can project. Same thing you can do with Hindustan Lever, or, all these companies which have a solid past. The problem is you need a past, and most startups do not have a past. Many of them are not making a profit at all. Many of them are, even if they're making a profit, they have only 2 months, 3 months of profit. Now, how do you project 2 or 3 months of profit into the next 3 years? And if they're making a loss, how do you project that? So the problem is, in a startup, it is almost impossible. Even God cannot project the future, right? Plus, they may have pivoted several times, which means they've changed their business model several times. And because they have done that, business model has changed. Again, you can't project, right? So the problem is, your conventional methods of doing valuation are go for a 6 when you talk about startups. So standard models of valuation do not work with startups, because there is no past, there is nothing to base it on. Agreed? So what is normally done is we use thumb rules. And there are many thumb rules. I'll share with you the most common one that we use. It depends on the stage of the startup. So if it's at a concept level with a successful pilot, normally you'll get somewhere between 3 to 6 crores of valuation. If you have some minimal history of revenues, you'll get about 8 to 10 crores. If you have a significant history of revenues, you will get 12 crores plus, right? But ultimately, valuation is a negotiation game. If everybody is chasing the same startup, valuation goes up. If nobody is chasing it, but everybody is chasing the same investor, the valuation goes down, right? So, that's the issue. Ultimately, it's a negotiation game. Normally concludes either in a coffee shop or in a bar. So you'll have the founder on one side, you'll have the investors on the other side, and the founder says, sir, ye to 12 crore hona chahiye. And the investor says, ho hi nahi sakta, minimum, maximum 5 crore. And then they keep sipping beer and they keep discussing, and finally they shake hands on 7 crores. That is the way startup valuation normally happens. So there are thumb rules, but ultimately there are only thumb rules. Okay, so I think with that I will stop. And by the way, this is a link to the book in case some of you want to pick it up. So if you have, sorry.
Yes, sir. I have one question from valuation part.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So in case of Airbnb, how we can value Airbnb? Because it is such a unique proposition that we don't have comparables in that segment.
Yeah, not only, so it's not only Airbnb, by the way, it's not only Airbnb. The problem is any startup. Okay, so firstly, Airbnb is in a different league. It is not a startup anymore. It is, it's a giant, right? It's a world leader, right? But if you look at somebody who is similar to Airbnb at a very early stage, typically we will use the same parameters. Also, you must remember, it is very difficult to find comparables for the simple reason, if you look at the stock market, it's much easier to value because you can look at, let's say, price to book or price to earnings of the entire industry. Let's say if it's a bank, and if HDFC Bank is valued at, let's say, 3.8 price to book, and IndusInd Bank is valued at, let's say, 1.7 price to book, there is some scope for the valuation to go up. So you can understand that because you can compare. In startups, nobody knows because this is all private information. So you don't know who the other guys are. Even if there are other guys in this business, you don't know what valuation they got money at because nobody talks about it, right? So that's the problem with valuation in startups. And ultimately, like I keep saying, it is a demand and supply situation. But if you look at Airbnb, suppose somebody were to start off today. Okay, I'll give you a parallel. There is a very interesting guy called Villotail, which you can look at, Villotale, who's looking at homestays in rural environments, right? So he'll give you a village experience as well. And he has branded those homes a little like Oyo rooms. This guy right now has no revenues, so he will not get funding. But when he starts getting revenues, my guess is that he will get a decent valuation because it's almost a virgin territory, huge market size, huge scalability because, he doesn't need any infrastructure, any significant infrastructure. And people have already seen the kind of growth that guys like Airbnb have had. Right? So I suspect he'll get decent valuation. My guess is he'll probably start somewhere between 7 and 10. But again, these are very, very ballpark figures. Okay. Any other questions?
Yes, sir. Sir Isha here.
Yeah,
So I have a question.
So now you have to send me a chocolate.
Definitely, sir. So it will be a virtual again. Virtual chocolate.
I'm sending you physical chocolate after COVID.
Sure, sir, sure. So once I was watching a video of Richa Kar of Zivame. So she was saying in that video that before she met the first fund, she actually met around 300 investors, and after which she got the first funding from Ratan Tata, which was approximately $1 million or something. So I was asking that 300 investors is a huge number, and to sustain through that period is a very is an task in itself only. So how do we startups sustain?
Yes, absolutely. Hold on, let me just stop sharing my screen so I can see your faces now. Yeah. Okay. So first of all, that's a very rare occurrence. That's not a very common occurrence. It is very rare for a startup to raise $1 million right away. Much more common is going to be something like 1 crore, 1.5 crores, right? And that 1 to 1.5 crores, normally every large angel network is able to manage, not a problem, right? So for example, we have raised funds worth 1.5 crores. And very often we ourselves are in touch with other angel networks. So if a guy wants to raise, let's say 2.5, and we can't raise more than 1, then we pull in the other guys as well. So we do it jointly, and that's a very common thing. So we work very closely with Indian Angel Network, with Chennai Angel, Hyderabad Angel, and so on. Right? So normally you will first raise a smaller amount, for which typically, see, if you have a good proposition, going to 1 or maybe 2 or 3 angel networks is normally enough. The problem is if you have a non-investable kind of startup, then you can chase any number, you will not get your money, right? I'll tell you probably why. I don't know who this, what this startup was. I'll tell you where you might want to approach Ratan Tata or Azim Premji. Typically, so let me give you an example. 2 years back, this whole business of EV, electric vehicles was a huge thing. But everybody knows that EV is a very long-term business. It's not something that is going to give you an exit in 3 or 4 years, right? So an average angel investor like me will not invest in EVs. In fact, we get a lot of requests, but we don't look at these because we say, look, boss, we want an exit, we will not invest. However, there are these rich angels who are looking at much longer term, A. B, they are looking at doing good work for the country, right? So Azim Premji, Anand Mahindra, Ratan Tata, Narayan Murthy and co. They are the kind of guys who will invest things like this, and there they could put in big amounts. But conventionally, normally for the typical startup, 1 to 1.5 crores is the common amount, and that is not a problem with angels. And no way you have to. I mean, you will die if you try and meet 300 angels. You will die, they will die. There's no way in hell you can do that.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Anybody else? I think Sayandeep was saying something. No.
Sir, I actually wanted to ask you, do you think it's wise for a startup which is at a very early stage to dilute, for the founder to dilute his equity in order to get funding?
So first of all, I must tell you, and this is a very important thing, even though my book is all about funding, don't take funding unless you really need it. Okay. Funding is not something which has to be taken because it is fashionable, because you can talk about it at parties, because, you know, VC circle or your story will write a story about you. No. You have to build a viable business, right? And like I said, you have to grow rapidly, otherwise somebody else is going to kill you. If to grow rapidly, you need funding, by all means take it. But if to grow rapidly, you don't need funding. For example, if you have a consulting kind of business, right, which is a B2B business, which is very heavily manpower intensive, you may not need funding. But if you have a B2C business, typically you have to build a brand, you have to spend a hell of a lot on marketing. You will need funding to grow rapidly, right? And you have to build a brand. Those are the kinds of businesses where you have no option, you have to take funding. Or if you're trying to create a fairly sophisticated product, whether it's a hardware product or a software product or whatever, you'll probably need funding for that. So where you do need funding, take it. My normal recommendation, and that's a norm that all of us follow, initially do not dilute more than about 10 to 15% of equity that you hold. Okay. So for example, if you're raising let's say 1 crore, diluting 15% equity means you're talking of a valuation of approximately 7 crores or $1 billion, which is okay, which is fine. Next round, again, dilute maybe about 10-12%, right? Ultimately, you know, as you grow, you'll have to dilute more and more because, you know, when you grow, the quantum of funds you have to raise is much, much higher, right? And therefore, you'll have to dilute more and more. But if you've diluted too much too early, which is the question Shruti raised, then the next guy would not want to invest in you for two reasons. Firstly, he says you don't have enough skin in the game. And secondly, he says you will not at some stage, very early stage, have enough control over the company. So you can't run it. So yes, I agree. Try and do it very, very gradually. 10-12% at a time is the norm that we normally suggest. But of course, if you want to raise $1 million, then, I mean, you'll probably have to dilute more. And, you know, if Ratan Tata is buying into your company, I don't think you need to worry. He's a sweet guy. I haven't met him, but I'm sure you guys have.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Anybody else?
So I have a question.
So
yeah, who said that?
Sir Shayans.
Shayans. Yeah, Shayans. Bolo.
So I'm perplexed by a lot of valuations. Let's say a company like Zomato. So how they keep on getting on $100 million runways again and again, even if they don't make profits.
Very, very good question. So you and Shruti both get chocolates. Very good question. In fact, a lot of us are asking the same question. Okay, and I'll tell you what is happening in the world. See, you know, when you had the dot-com boom, which is around the year 2000, right? At that time, it was eyeballs at any cost. Eyeball le aao, dhanda kisi time pe aa jayega. Don't worry, revenue aa jayega, dekhi jayegi. Or you'll get money from advertising or whatever, right? Then that went bust. And people said, now we need to get growth or revenues at any cost. And that continued for many, many years. I would say it continued for about 15, 16 years, till very recently. Get growth at any cost, grow 3 times, 4 times every year. Even if you're making a loss, koi baat nahi. Doesn't matter. At some stage you will break even. Now people are questioning that. They are saying if you're growing and you're making a loss continuously, you're not a viable business. So investors today are increasingly saying, I don't need to see profit today, but I want to see a path to profitability. Can you show me that in 1 year or 2 years, you will grow to whatever extent you will, and you will also be profitable? And I'll give you two very good examples of this. Both of them, by the way, are listed companies now, and they're very good companies to invest in case you want to. One is InfoEdge, which is the holding company of Naukri, and the other one is a company called India Mart, which is into B2B online e-commerce, right? Now, these guys do not grow magically at 100%, 500% a year. They grow solidly at 20, 25, 30% a year, but they are not loss making. In fact, the founder of India Mart, I interviewed him for my book, and his name is Dinesh Agarwal. He made a brilliant statement which I'll share with you guys. He says, देखो, गाड़ी तेज चलाना एक नशा है, लेकिन जब आपका पेट्रोल खत्म हो जाएगा आप क्या करोगे, right? So growing rapidly at any cost, loss making, I keep getting more and more money from investors, nasha hai. But at some stage the investor says, no, you saw what happened to WeWork, correct? WeWork tried to have an IPO, it bombed. In fact, SoftBank is in fairly deep trouble right now because a lot of their investments they have made are in these kinds of companies. So increasingly now, the world is moving away from growth at any cost to sustainable growth. And I think that's a very, very good thing, very, very good thing, because otherwise, I mean, you'll have these mammoths who are loss making. It's pointless, absolutely pointless. So you're absolutely right. All investors are asking this question. Boss, आज की डेट में प्रॉफिट नहीं चाहिए, no problem. But कभी तो दिखाओगे, वो कब होगा? And your profit, Rakesh Jhunjhunwala keeps saying this. He says your profit cannot be the next round of investment. It has to come from the business, isn't it? So that's important. So the world, fortunately, is moving in that direction.
Sir, do you have similar views on Byju's as well? I mean, because Byju's is doing great, but the views which I've shared right now is applicable for Byju's as well?
So Byju's, let me put it like this, that is true for everybody. Everybody. Today, Byju's is able to raise money, but there will come a time when they will not be able to. You must remember one thing. Byju's is today a very, very clear market leader. In a market which, every parent will pay anything to get his child a better education, right? So Byju's is a huge, it is a market leader in a huge segment, right? Now that it has reached this stage, this is the time for them to move towards sustainability, right? Of course, I don't know what the founder of Byju's is thinking, but this is the time all these big guys have to move towards that. And that will happen. It will not continue forever like this. Like I told you, SoftBank has stopped. And there are other people who stopped. We, as angel investors, when we see a guy who's only showing growth and growth and growth, we are not interested. Here to sustainable kab hoga. So that change is happening. I can't comment specifically on Byju's. You'll have to ask Byju Ravindran or ask his wife. But in general, the world is moving towards that.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, with your answer, I want to understand the difference between growth and sustainability.
See, growth is what? Growth refers to revenue, right? 5 crores revenue, 10 crores revenue, 20 crores revenue. Sustainable growth means you are making a profit, therefore you can continue to grow even though you do not get external investments, right? So the way I would put it, in fact, I'll give you one more very strong thought that we guys have. You should not need money for survival. You should not need external investments for survival. If you need external investment for survival, there is something wrong with your business. It is not a sustainable business. But if you can survive on your own, if you can grow maybe marginally on your own, but to grow more, you're bringing in funds, that is okay. That's okay, right? So sustainable business is a business that survives and even though marginally grows on its own. If you're running, so for example, you look at a guy like, let's say, Oyo Rooms, right? He's loss making, okay? And today he's in trouble because of COVID, right? Which is a different issue. But today, if this guy had a sustainable business, let's keep COVID aside, If he had a sustainable business, he would say, okay, I will not grow 300% every year. I will only grow maybe 5, 10%, 15, 20% in a year through my own resources, which I'm generating, which is my profits. But he's not able to. That is the problem. So as long as you are able to sustain yourself, survive, grow marginally, you're okay. Yes, now you want funds to grow rapidly, by all means take them. If you don't get the fund, you will still survive. I think that's what people are moving towards.
Thank you, sir.
Sure.
Thank you, sir. Like, due to positive time, we won't be able to take more questions, but all the knowledge and strategies that you shared with us today are definitely going to help us in long run. And
Sure,
I'm sure.
wonderful. And I knew Dipanshu would mention the word strategy. B school campus se strategy word nahi aayega, so there is something wrong.
The frameworks too, 4P, 7Cs.
Sorry?
The frameworks too, we'll learn a lot of frameworks also.
Ah, yeah. Correct. You know, there is somebody, a friend of mine who went through IIM Ahmedabad, and he said something very interesting. He was a topper at IIT Delhi. He says, B school teaches you common sense that you learn anyway, but it teaches you the same thing with jargon. And I think it's very sensible what he said. Okay, so by the way, I must tell you guys, all of you have the honor of being appointed distributor for my book. Okay, don't worry, you don't have to buy it. You want to buy it, you can, entirely up to you. But just share. I don't know, can I put the link here? Hold on.
Sure, sir.
Can I put the link somewhere? Where do I put the link?
Yeah, so we would share with the batch the
So
link
in the
for
chat box, or you?
Or I'll send it to the, where is the chat box? I can see.
Yes, I have the link in the.
You are. There you go. And the target for each one of you is 1500 copies, because I want to start small. I don't want to demotivate you guys. So I'm joking, but try and share with your friends, because I would like this to become, go around the world.
You're definitely gonna be, sir.
Okay, great. Chalo.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And enjoy yourselves, enjoy your chocolates, and hopefully sometime we will meet.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you so much, sir. It was really wonderful.
Thank you, sir.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks and bye-bye.